Kia ora te whānau, a iho karaiti ko Andrew Doubleday ho. Today we're looking at the Gospel for Sunday the 2nd of November 2025. It's Luke chapter 19 verses 1 through to 10. Again, another very well known story. One that is the stuff of Sunday school. The story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector. So we pick up the narrative at Luke chapter 19 verse 1. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see him, because he was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried down and was happy to welcome him. All who saw it began to grumble and said, he's gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, half of my possessions, Lord, I give to the poor, or I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Then Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. As I'm preparing this homily today, I have just spent the best part of the last week with the Presbyterian General Assembly. And it was, for the most part, it was a great experience. It was rich, it was joyful, it was positive, it was energized, it was beautifully managed by the moderator, the Right Reverend Peter Dunn. It was a great event, and it was beautifully supported by the Samoan people of St. Paul's Trinity Pacific here in Otarahi, Christchurch. It was great. Yet there were some things for me personally, and basically it's because I'm Methodist. Because way back in the 1980s, I responded to a strong sense of call to the Methodist Church of New Zealand. Now, in the early 2000s, we had, and the congregation that I served had 10 years out. But again, I think in 2009, a strong and for me undeniable sense of call to return to the Methodist Church of New Zealand. Now, for some people, this is problematic, and there was a sense of it being implicit, but I had 1 or 2 encounters, and one in particular, where the offence at me being Methodist was explicitly stated, and a series of complaints laid out about the Methodist Church of New Zealand. I had a sense in some small way of being Zacchaeus. And I know that although the person in this case who spoke to me, that he had at least the courage, the chutzpah to do it, there would have been a fair measure that felt the same way, yet said nothing. It was just a sense, it was implicit, it was it's just there. And part of the grief for me, as I've reflected on it, is a complete lack of curiosity on their part as to how I got to this place, as to why I am where I am and have such a commitment to Tahahi Witeriana, to the Methodist Church of New Zealand. So I get it. Zacchaeus was much hated. And he was hated because primarily of what he did, of the pathway that he was chosen. It says, we read that he was also short, and I suspect very short. And I wonder if in some way this limited his career choices. It may or may not have, I do not know. What we are clear about, and the narrative tells us, is that Zacchaeus had to be careful in public. He had to avoid crowds. Well, first is that he would not be able to see anything, but the other thing is that I imagine at best he had to watch out for sharp elbows, and at worst perhaps even knives. And yet we see in Zacchaeus a deep yearning to be accepted. He knew of Jesus, that's clear. And the text tells us he wanted to see who he was. It's not he just wanted to see him. He didn't want to just lay eyes on him. There's a sense of something deeper. He's looking for a deep sense of wanting to know the very essence, the very character of Jesus. He wanted to see who he was. So he knows he's not going to be able to get to the front row of the crowd. So he runs down the street, seeing the path that Jesus is taking, and he climbs a tree, a sycamore tree. I imagine it's got low branches that allows a short man to climb up, and he gets to be able to, it doesn't have to be terribly high, but just enough to be able to see over the heads of the crowd. Very undignified thing to do. And I imagine that it would have been a source of much mirth and hilarity and ridicule from the self-respecting Jewish people of Jericho. Poking fun. And yet we also see it as an act of desperation on his part. He really does want to get a deeper sense of and hopefully meet Jesus. Now, what does Jesus do? Well, he shocks everyone. He actually was only passing through Jericho. Actually, that was the plan. But he doesn't. He stops. He interrupts the plan. And he ends up staying the night. He invites Zacchaeus out of the tree and invites himself to Zacchaeus' house. And Zacchaeus, it would seem, has a big party, and he gathers all the other undesirables, the other unacceptables, the other outcasts, the not good enoughs, to be part of it. And Jesus has a ball. Now, what we hear from Zacchaeus is a commitment to a changed life. And the kind of translations that we have and that we read from the New Revised Standard Version indicates it was a commitment to a changed life. It was one that was looking forward. It seems to cast this commitment into the future. Half of my possessions I will give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much. Yet the King James Version, which I grew up on, casts it in the presence. It's I give. If I've taken, I restore. It's as if it's common practice. I didn't do Greek when I was at college. So I rely on things like an interlinear, a good one, and it also casts it in the present, as does Young's literal translation. Now, it may not mean anything. It could be that the current interpretation, which gives a present commitment to a future action, is kind of, I here and now commit myself to give half my belongings to the poor. And if it can be shown that I've cheated anyone, I'll pay them back fourfold. Now, this makes some sense and is, in fact, the usual approach. And yet, I've been struck by Eugene Peterson's interpretation in the Message. Now, Peterson was a scholar of biblical languages. That was his primary passion. He puts it this way: Master, I give away half my income to the poor, and if I'm caught cheating, I pay back 4 times the damages. Now, as I read him, this is Zacchaeus' common practice, and perhaps has been for years. My hunch is that in his giving of half of his income, he's discreet about it. He doesn't blow trumpets, he doesn't make a noise, he's careful, he's discreet. He gives in a way that is hard for people to actually recognize where the gift comes from. He's scrupulous in all his business dealings. He has no intent to do anything but the right thing. This man is no cheat. Yet, to his fellow Jewish citizens, it's not enough. It will never be enough. And this it seems to me, gives a softer understanding of Zacchaeus. What he seeks from Jesus is acceptance. He wants to know that he's okay. Perhaps vindication, even approval, that Jesus receives, understands, approves of him. But above all, simple acceptance. And he receives it. It may be that in terms of the practice of his life, little changes. Yet he now has a sense of being accepted and loved. The reality is that many of us live messy lives. They're not as we might hope that they would be. Somehow imagining that we need to give a perfect performance every time, yet falling short and living with an ongoing sense of shame that we're not enough. I was at a funeral just yesterday of one of the saints of the congregation that I served for 26 years. She was great. But she struggled with the cigarette, and she yearned for a breakthrough, that kind of miraculous thing that would just once and for all take away the yearning of this particular addiction. And I don't think it ever came. It was something that she struggled with for a significant part of her life. I have a hunch, and I don't know if I actually said this, but I have a hunch that the problem of smoking was a problem for her, but not a problem for God. I know that God didn't love her any less because she struggled with this. But there was a sense that also was a gift and kept her closer to the Lord because she knew her profound sense of need. And here we see Zacchaeus, imperfect though he is, giving his best. Because perhaps in the end, he recognizes that he lives primarily before an audience of one, as we all do. It's not what others think of us that matters. It's what God thinks, how God regards us. And God, the God we worship, is Christ-like. It's as we see Jesus, we see God. And for Jesus, Zacchaeus is a son of Abraham, no less than all of those around who would condemn him. Zacchaeus is accepted. And me, as a Methodist, I have confidence that I also am acceptable to Jesus. Amen. God bless you.